Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about the first paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. This is a paragraph that Bhagavan wrote when he rewrote the question and answer versions in the form of an essay. This paragraph was not part of the original answers that he gave to Shiva Prakash Pillai, but he added this as an introduction. This paragraph is not only an introduction to this particular text, it is the perfect introduction to Bhagavan's teachings as a whole. And actually, what he wrote in this paragraph is an adaptation and condensation of what he wrote in the Avatarike, the introduction that he wrote for his Tamil translation of Vivekanchudamani, which he had written, I think that was back in 1912 or 1908 or sometime. Anyway, it was long before. It was 15 to 20 years earlier. Bhagavan had on the request of a devotee, he had translated Shankaracharya's Vivekanchudamani into Tamil prose, and he wrote an introduction for it. In that, he began his introduction with the same basic idea, but in a slightly fuller form. So this is we can say an adaptation of that, but it condenses the whole introduction to his teachings. So this is an extremely important paragraph, and every word and every clause in this paragraph is important. It's a short paragraph. It consists just of 2 sentences. The first sentence is a long one with several clauses. Bhagavan is giving a very carefully worded argument here for the fact, first, that our real nature is happiness. So in order to experience happiness, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. That is, in order to experience unlimited happiness is the implication. So I will go through this first sentence clause by clause, because then only the argument will be very clear. In the first clause, he says, Sakala Jivagalam Dukkam Embadindri Epodum Sukamai Iraka Virumbuvadalam. That means, since all jīvas, that's all sentient beings, want or like to be always happy without what is called misery. That is what Bhagavan is saying here is, but not only all human beings, all sentient beings, which means from the smallest ant to the highest gods in heaven, what all sentient beings are seeking, what all jīvas are seeking, is happiness. The reason why he's giving this as an argument, but that is what he is arguing in this first sentence, is that happiness is our real nature. So to experience the infinite happiness that we actually are, we need to know ourselves. So all these clauses are arguments leading up to that conclusion. So we all sentient beings want to be always happy without what is called misery. When he says without what is called misery, what he implies is that we want unalloyed happiness. In other words, infinite happiness, happiness without any limit, happiness untainted by even the slightest misery. The word he uses here for happiness is sukham, and for misery is dukkham. Sukham we can also understand as meaning satisfaction, and dukkham as dissatisfaction. The reason I say this, that dukkham means dissatisfaction, because it is misery in the broadest possible sense of the term. It includes, so I think the broadest term we have in English to convey the term of dukkham is dissatisfaction. So it's everything from dissatisfaction to intense misery. The whole range is covered by this word dukkham. I will talk about this more later on. So this is the first premise. We all want to be happy always without uncontaminated by misery, without what is called misery, as he says. In the second clause, he says, Yavakum tan iditilaye paramapriyam irupadalam. That means, since for everyone, the greatest love is only for oneself. Tan iditilaye literally means is only in oneself. But in English, that's how it's expressed in Tamil. In English, we would say only for oneself. That is, we all love ourselves more than we love any other thing. And he puts a double emphasis here. That is, the sense of only is conveyed by the suffix a. That's an intensifier in Tamil. When that here he's used that. He's repeated that suffix, a. That is a very strong intensifier. That is, he's very strongly emphasizing, but more, the implication, more than we love any other thing, we love ourselves. We have the greatest love for ourselves. And as he explained elsewhere, we love other things to the extent that they contribute to our happiness. So whatever else we may love, we love it because we love ourselves. That is the fundamental love that we have is love for ourselves. This is not wrong because this is our very nature. Even in our real nature, we have greatest love for ourselves. That is Brahman, our real nature, Atmaswarupam. Its very nature is infinite love. But in its view, there's nothing other than itself. So what it loves is only itself. So the love that we as an ego have for ourselves as what we now seem to be is a reflection of that fundamental self-love, which is our own real nature. So that's the second clause. In the third clause, he says, Priyataku sukume karanamadalalum. And since happiness alone is the cause for love. So there are three premises here. Firstly, we all want to be happy always without any misery. So we all love to be happy. We all have greatest love for ourselves. And what makes us love anything? Only happiness. That is, only if we think something will make us happy, do we love it. If we think something is going to make us miserable, we dislike it. So we love those things that make us happy. So what Bhagavan is, the conclusion that Bhagavan wants us to draw from these first three clauses is, since we always want to be happy, we've got greatest love for ourselves, and happiness alone is the cause for love. The implication is that we ourselves are happiness. That is what Bhagavan is implying here. I'll discuss this argument a little more in more detail afterwards, but I'll just proceed for the time being. Then in the next clause, it's no longer a since clause, but he gives here another argument another reason why happiness, another argument to convince us that happiness is our own real nature. What he says in the next clause is, Manamatra nidrayal dinumanubhavikam tan subhavamana achukate adeya. That means to attain that happiness, tan subhavamana, which is one's own nature, one's own svabhava. And then there's another relative clause for that, dinumadubhavikam, nidrayal dinumadubhavikam, that is, which one experiences daily in nidra. Nidra means deep sleep, and dreamless sleep. So we experience it daily in dreamless sleep, and he added one more word there, manamatra nidrayal. That means in dreamless sleep, which is devoid of mind. So in sleep, there's no mind. Therefore, we experience nothing other than ourselves in sleep. What we experience is only I am, nothing else. But in that state where we are aware of nothing other than ourselves, we are perfectly happy. So this is another reason why we should believe, why we should accept the fact that happiness is our own real nature. We experience dukkha, misery, only in waking and dream when we rise as mind. When there's no mind, when we're in a state of complete isolation where we alone exist and we're not aware of anything else, we are perfectly happy. And we experience that every day in sleep. So that's another reason why happiness is our nature. So in this clause, that is, this clause has several sub-clauses, several relative clauses within this clause. But the main point of this clause is in order to attain that, literally he just says to attain that happiness. That implies in order to attain that happiness. But he further emphasized the fact that that happiness is our own real nature. He adds in this extended relative clause, manamatra nidril, dinumanubhavikam tansubhavamana. That happiness, which is one's own real nature, which one experiences daily in sleep, which is devoid of mind. So in order to attain that happiness, what is required? The last clause of this sentence, tanne tan aridal vendam. Oneself, knowing oneself is necessary. So what Bhagavan is arguing in this sentence, of course, this argument is for our sake, not for Bhagavan's sake, because he knew himself as he actually is. He already experienced himself as infinite happiness. So he didn't need any logical arguments to convince himself. This is for our sake, because we now are experiencing, and when we rise as ego, we experience a mixture of sukha and dukkha. We don't experience unlimited sukha, but that we experience a mixture of happiness and unhappiness, satisfaction and dissatisfaction. So Bhagavan, according to Bhagavan, the reason we don't experience unlimited, eternal happiness, unalloyed happiness, happiness untainted by misery, is because we are not aware, we do not know ourselves. In other words, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So the root problem, and as Bhagavan explained elsewhere, it's our rising as ego. When we rise as ego, what we actually are is only the pure awareness I am. When we rise as ego, instead of being aware of ourselves just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. And consequently, we're aware of so many other things. When we remain just as I am, we're aware of nothing other than ourselves. And in that state, we're perfectly happy. So the problem is our rising as ego. But Bhagavan has explained that in more detail elsewhere, but here he's just giving the bare bones of the argument. That is, we all love to be happy always, without any misery. We all have greatest love only for ourselves, and happiness alone is the cause for love. So in order to attain that happiness, which we experience, which is our own nature, and which we experience every day in sleep, which is devoid of mind, it's necessary for ourselves to know ourselves. That is, we need to know what we actually are. And then in the second and last sentence of this paragraph, because when he says it's necessary for oneself to know oneself, then how are we to know ourselves? Is the obvious question we should ask. And for that, he provides the answer in the second sentence. What he says in the second sentence is adaku. Adaku means for that. That means for knowing oneself. Nāṉ Ār ennum jnana-vichara me mukhya sadhanam. For that, jnana-vichara, called who am I, alone is the principal means. Jnana-vichara, vichara means investigation. Jnana means, in this context, it means awareness. It implies the awareness that we actually are. It implies our own real nature. That is, as Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Uludu Napadu, Jnanamam tane me, oneself who is happiness alone is real. So the jnana he's referring to here is the pure awareness that we actually are. So we need to investigate this fundamental awareness I am. And this investigation of this awareness I am is called Nāṉ Ār, who am I? In other words, what we're investigating is who or what we actually are. And he said, this alone is the principal means. Mukhya sadhanam. Sadhanam means, mukhya means principle. But in what sense does he say it's the principal means? Does he mean that there are many means and this is just the best means? It has actually it has a more precise meaning than that. That is, as Bhagavan often explained, ultimately, this is the only means by which we can know ourselves. That is, in order to, since our goal is to know ourselves as we actually are, to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to look at ourselves alone. So long as we're looking at other things, that is, when we're aware of anything other than ourselves, what is aware of other things is only ego. So long as we're aware of anything other than ourselves, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to attend to ourselves alone. So there is, whatever other means we may adopt, sooner or later, we need to come to this path of Jnana-vichara, of Atma-vichara, which is, self-investigation means turning our attention back to face ourselves alone. There is no other way. So what is the relationship between this and all the other means? Bhagavan never says other means are useless, but this is the principal means. So when he says it's the principal means, what is he implying here? Supposing you have supposing there's only one river that joins the ocean. All other rivers, in order to join the ocean, they must first flow into that main river, and then through that main river, once they merge in that main river, then they will be carried away to the ocean and merged in the ocean. So that one main river, the only river that discharges into the ocean, that is the principal river. All the other rivers that flow into that river, they're all tributaries. That doesn't mean those rivers aren't useful. Those rivers are bringing so much water into the main river, but they cannot bring water direct to the ocean. They have to bring it into the main river in order for that water to be carried back to its source, the ocean. Likewise, all other paths are beneficial to the extent that they lead us to this path of self-investigation, because only this path of self-investigation will lead us to the ocean of infinite happiness. So it's in that sense that he says this is the principal means. So what is the, this is a slight digression, but just to understand this a bit more clearly, what is the benefit to be gained from other paths? The purpose of all other spiritual paths, all other types of spiritual practice is purification of the mind. What does purification of the mind mean? The impurities in our mind are what are called Vishaya vasanas. Vasanas means inclination. Vishaya vasanas are the inclination to experience Vishayas. Vishayas means objects or phenomena. So our inclination to be aware of any object, anything other than ourselves, is called a Vishaya vasana. So long as we have those inclinations to be aware of other things, we don't have sufficient love to turn our mind back within. That is, those Vishaya vasanas draw our mind outwards, away from ourselves towards other things. In order to know what we actually are, we need to turn our mind, our attention, back to ourselves, to face ourselves alone. So we need to be ready to let go of everything else. So because the Vishaya vasanas draw our mind away from ourselves, they are the impurities. They are what needs to be cleansed. Other paths are useful means to purify the mind. Because when the mind is very impure, full of Vishaya vasanas, it will lack the clarity to recognize, but ultimately to attain the happiness that we're all seeking, we need to know ourselves, and to know ourselves, we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves. For people whose mind is very strongly outward going, that will this simple truth will not be clear. Even though they may understand the logic of the argument that Bhagavan gives here, they'll find some way of disputing the premises, or they won't imbibe it. They just won't be ready to accept this argument. Though the logic of the argument is impeccable, they will try and find fault with the premises. So only people whose mind has been purified to a sufficient extent will be willing to accept that the only way to attain the happiness that we actually are is to know ourselves. And the only way to know ourselves, that is to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, is to attend to ourselves alone. So the other parts are beneficial as means of purifying the mind. As Bhagavan says in verse 3 of Upadesha Undiyya, what he says in verse 3 of Upadesha Undiyya is, Kartanu kakam nishkarmiya karmam, karte tirti aktundi para, gativari kambikum undi para. What that means is, nishkarmiya karma means action that is not motivated by desire. Action done without expecting any particular result from that action. In order to act without desire, that is because the very nature of the mind is desire, all our actions are driven by desire of some form or another. So in order to act without motivation, without being motivated by desire for any particular aim, it's only when we have love for God that we can truly do nishkarmiya karma. So Bhagavan says, Kartanu kakam nishkarmiya karma. That means nishkarmiya karma, which is done for God. Done for God implies done for the love of God. Because we love, if we truly love God, we will do whatever actions are necessary to do, but we're not doing it because we want to gain anything from those actions. We're doing it only for the love of God. So that is the real meaning of karma yoga. So Bhagavan said that actions done without motivation for desire, but only for the love of God, karte tirti, they will rectify the mind. What he means by rectify the mind is they will purify the mind. In the Sanskrit version of that verse, he says, chitta sodakam, they purify the mind. That means it will weaken the Vishaya vasanas, is the implication. It will purify the mind. And he adds there in the last line, Gativari Kambikam, it will show the way to liberation. How will it show the way to liberation? To the extent that our mind is purified, it is thereby clarified. And only in the mind that is sufficiently clarified will it be able to recognize, yes, the only way to liberation is Atma-vichara, the investigation of our own, of the fundamental awareness that we actually are. So all other spiritual practices are beneficial only to the extent that they purify the mind. And in Upadesha Undiyya, Bhagavan then goes on to explain how there are different types of nishkarmiya karma one can do. That is, they're all motivated by love of God. So there are three kinds, basically. As he says in verse 4, wait, I'll just get the verse. Didumidu puja japamum dhyanam udulva ulla toril. That is, this is certain. Puja, japa, and dhyana are actions of body, speech, and mind. It implies respectively. That is, puja is action done by body. Japa is action done by speech. And dhyana, meditation, is action done by mind. So these are the context in which he's talking about these. He's talking about this in the context of nishkarmiya karma. So there are only three kinds of nishkarmiya karma we can do: actions by body, actions by speech, and actions by mind, because these are the three instruments of action. So the implication in this verse is that he's talking about nishkarmiya karma. Nishkarmiya, in other words, nishkarmiya puja, nishkarmiya japa, and nishkarmiya dhyana. And he says, Vivu ahum ondril ondru. That's a very terse way of saying, but what it literally means is one than one is superior. What that means is, in this order, that is superior to puja is japa, superior to japa is dhyana. What does he mean by here? In what sense are they superior? He means they're more effective in purifying the mind, because the aim of all these actions, if we do them without desire, but just for the love of God, the aim is to purify our mind. So in this order, each one is more effective than the previous one. So japa is a more effective means of purifying the mind than puja, and meditation is a more effective means of purifying the mind than japa. But with the important, we have to understand this verse in context. Bhagavan isn't talking about just any puja, any japa, any dhyana, because people do puja, for example, for material benefits or for praying to go to heaven or whatever. That is all karmiya. This is in the context of nishkarmiya. So it implies nishkarmiya puja, nishkarmiya japa, nishkarmiya dhyana. In other words, puja, japa, and dhyana, but are done without desire and for the love of God. So in this order, each one is more effective. And then in the next three verses, he talks about each of these in turn, explaining how, and different types of japa and how each one is more effective than the other one. But then he comes to verse 8, which is the point I want to make now, is what he says in verse 8. Up to verse 7, he's been talking about puja, japa, and dhyana. In verse 8, he distinguishes two types of meditation. This is meditation done with the love of God. So it implies meditation on God, meditation on a name or form of God. But then he says, rather than Anya Baba, Ananya Baba, in which he is I, alone is the best among all. Rather than Anya Baba means, rather than meditating on, Anya means what is other. Baba here in this context means meditation. So rather than meditating on what is other, that implies rather than meditating on God as something other than oneself, Ananya Baba, meditation on what is not other. In other words, meditating on God as not other than oneself. And to clarify that, he says, Abanaham Ahum Ananya Babam. Abanaham Ahum means in which he is I. So when we have the strong conviction that God is that which is shining in us as I, what should we meditate on? In order to meditate on God, we should meditate just on I, because he's nothing other than I. So that is where the devotion, that is devotion to a name and form of God, once it is revealed by Guru, but God is that which is shining in us as I, we can cease meditating on a name and form and meditate on God directly, because God is what is always shining in our heart as I. And he says, of all the types of meditation, of all the types of nishkarmiya karma, of all the types of bhakti, anatinam uttamam, this is the best of all. That means this practice of attending only to I, the implication is it's the most effective means of purifying the mind. So though other practices are useful means of beneficial in purifying the mind, the most effective means of purifying the mind is meditation on I alone. In other words, self-investigation. So self-investigation is the most effective means to purify the mind. It's also the only means by which we can know ourselves as we actually are. In other words, but what is the root of all mental impurity? It is only ego. That is, the impurities in the mind are Vishaya Vasanas. Whose Vishaya Vasanas are they? Who is it who is inclined to go outward? It is only we as ego. So the root of all the impurities in the mind is ego. And we can get rid of ego only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. And to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. So this practice of self-investigation is the best of all, not only because it's the most effective means of purifying the mind. In other words, you'll purify the mind more quickly and effectively than any other practice. It is also the only practice that will get rid of the root of all impurities, ego. So it's in this sense that Bhagavan says that Atma-vichara is the principal means. That is all the other practices. They'll purify the mind to a certain extent, but they cannot get rid of the root, because all other practices, it requires an ego in order to do them. In order to do puja, japa, dhyana, or any form of yoga, there must be an I to do it. So since they can be performed only so long as that I is there, they cannot get rid of that I. In order to get rid of that I, we need to investigate it. And so that is why this Atma-vichara is the principal means. So this is this paragraph. Before leaving this, I just want to talk about because as I said at the beginning, what Bhagavan says in the first sentence of this paragraph is an extremely important argument, and it is a condensed form of the argument that he gave, of what he wrote in the first sentence of his introduction to his translation of Vivekachudamani. So since he gives since there he gives the same idea in a slightly more expanded form, to understand this argument more clearly, it would be useful to see what Bhagavan said in this first sentence of his introduction to Vivekachudamani. What he says there is, it's very, very similar to this sentence in the first sentence of Nāṉ Ār, but it's slightly more expanded. What he says there is, in the first clause, he says, Ulahetil ella jivagalum dukumem vadindri epodum sukumai irika vendum enna koradalalum. That is, since all jīvas, all sentient beings in the world, wish that they should always be happening without what is called misery, then he adds here an illustration. He says, just Tansabhava malada rogati galei niki epodum pol sukumai irika vendum embadu pola. That means just as they desire or they wish that they should be happy always, happy as always, epodum pol means as always, removing disease and so on that are not their nature. This is an argument that Bhagavan often gave. Often he used to give the example of a headache. Supposing you have a headache, so long as you've got a headache, it is you would do anything to get rid of that headache. We want to be free of that headache. Why do we want to be free of the headache? Because the headache or any other disease is not our nature, it's not our svabhava. So anything that is not our svabhava detracts from our happiness. So we always want to get rid of what is unnatural in order to experience the happiness which is our own nature. So this is a very nice illustration. That is why we always want to be free of discomfort, free of disease, free of worries, because these are all unnatural to us. But it is not only the diseases and the discomforts and the worries and the excessive heat or excessive cold or hunger or thirst. These things are all unnatural to us, but they're not the only things that are unnatural to us. Even this body is unnatural to us. If this body were natural to us, we would always experience this body, but we experience this body in only one of our three states. In this waking state, we experience this body. as ourself. In sleep, in dream, we experience some other body as ourself. In sleep, we don't experience any body whatsoever. So no body is our real nature. So, so the body is unnatural to us. And what is it that takes this body to be I? The I that rises, mistaking itself to be this body, is only ego. The same ego identifies this body as I in this state and some other body as I in dream. But this ego exists only in waking and dream. In sleep, there's no ego at all. So even this ego is unnatural to us. So the root of all unnatural things is ego. So if we want to be happy, we need to get rid of ego. That is the implication here. So we always want to be free of what is not natural. What is natural, what is ever with us, is only that fundamental awareness I am. So that fundamental awareness I am, that alone is true happiness. When we remain just as I am in sleep, we're perfectly happy. When we rise as ego in waking and dreamers, we mistake ourselves. We're not aware of ourselves just as I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body. And so we experience so much misery. So the root problem is this rising of ego or mind. Then in the next clause, he says very much the same, but he said in the second clause of the first sentence of Nāṉ Ār, what he says here is, Yabakum tan iditileye atyanta priti irupadanam. That is, since for everyone, unlimited happiness exists only for oneself. That is, we all have unlimited, our love for other things is limited. So long as other things are making us happy, we love them. If something that we love begins to give us trouble, we no longer love it. So, but our love for ourselves is unlimited. So this is we have unlimited love is only for ourselves and not for any other thing. Our love for anything else is limited. And then he says in the next clause, similar to the third clause in this, but he puts it in a slightly different way. Whereas in Nāṉ Ār, he says, Priya tuku sukume karanamadalam, since for love, happiness alone is the cause. Here he says it be the same thing the other way around. He says, since love does priyam sukatilandri undahada dalam, since love does not arise except for happiness. That is, we do not love anything except for the sake of happiness. It's only happiness that makes us love things. So we love whatever makes us happy. And if something doesn't make us happy, we don't love it. Or even if it doesn't make us happy, we at least expect it to make us happy. If it doesn't yield the happiness that we expect it to yield, we are not satisfied. So we don't love it. We don't love it. And then in the next clause, he says, Nidrail ondrum indri sukumai irakum anubhavatalam. That is, and because of the experience of being happy without anything in sleep. That is, in sleep, we don't have anything other than ourselves. Nothing, we're not aware of anything other than ourselves. We're aware only of I am. Or not even aware of I am. We're aware I am. We're not aware of anything else. So, but we experience being perfectly happy there. So since we are happy in the absence of all other things in sleep, then in the next clause he says, Sukumembadu tanahave iraka. That means what is called happiness exists only as oneself. But this isn't a concluding clause. This is another. Iraka means when it is so. When it is the case that what is called happiness exists only as oneself. When it is so, Tanne Ariada Agnanatalaye Apara Samsaratil Urandru. Due to ajnana, due to our ignorance of not knowing oneself, we wander, or we roam about, or we whirl around in apara samsara, in endless samsara, in limitless samsara. So that's the end of that sentence, but there are two more sentences. I'll just read them. Oh, sorry, no, that's not quite the end of it. Due to the jnana of not knowing that, whirling around in samsara, or wandering around in samsara, sukham taram margam vittu, leaving the path to happiness, ihapara bogam adedale, sukhavari ena praviti kindrana. That means we make effort, we become extroverted, we go outwards, go rush out, believe. The implication is that there's no verb for believing, but it implies, Enna implies here, believing that attaining the pleasures, the pleasures of ihapara, that means of this world and the next world, meaning heaven, attaining the pleasures of this world and heaven, ihapara boga, is the way to happiness. Believing that, we make effort going outwards. So that's the end of the first sentence, and then he says, "Anal dukumatra sukum kidikira dille." That is, but happiness without misery is not obtained. That is, we don't attain happiness that way. Whatever great pleasures we may experience in, not only in this world, but even in the highest heaven, even if we go to the seventh heaven, the highest of all heavens, whatever pleasures we experience there do not give us happiness without misery. That is, whatever happiness we may experience there, it's all alloyed happiness. It's not unalloyed happiness. So Bhagavan is giving the same argument, but in a slightly more detailed way. So why is this fundamental to Bhagavan's teaching? Because Bhagavan, there is the principal aim of all Bhagavan's teachings. What are we all seeking? We're all seeking happiness without misery. That is the aim of Bhagavan's teachings. That is, Bhagavan doesn't want anything for us except that we should be happy without the slightest misery. And in order to be happy, to experience that unalloyed, infinite, eternal happiness, that is our own real nature, we need to be aware, we need to know ourselves. In other words, we need to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, because what we actually are is that infinite happiness. There's one more point I want to say about this. When Bhagavan says, Tanne tan aridal vendam, oneself knowing oneself is necessary. In order to attain that happiness, oneself knowing oneself is necessary. This implies that we do not know ourselves. What exactly does this mean when it talks about us not knowing ourselves? Yes, I know myself. I know I am. What more is there to know than that? There's nothing more to know than that. The problem is we don't know ourselves just as I am. We know ourselves as I am this body. I am so-and-so. I am Michael. I am such and such a person. So long as we are aware of ourselves as anything other than I am, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. It's this false awareness of ourselves as I am this person, I am this body, that is the cause of all our misery, all dukkam. Bhagavan makes this very clear in the in the 14th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. This 14th paragraph is Bhagavan is a very important, well, every paragraph in Nāṉ Ār is important. The 14th paragraph is important in that Bhagavan, there he goes into this subject of happiness in much greater detail. I won't go into this now because I won't go into the paragraph in detail now because obviously we're going to deal with it when we come there. But there are one or two points here, but I want to that are relevant to understanding this first paragraph more clearly. He says in one of the early sentences of the 14th paragraph, Manam veliyil varam podu dukkate anubhavikindridu. That means when the mind comes out, it experiences misery. What does he mean by when the mind comes out? Comes out from where? This is made clear if we go back to the 4th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, where he says, Manam atmaswarupatinindru velivaram podu jagam tondram. That means when the mind comes out from Atmaswarupa, the world appears. So the mind coming out in this 14th paragraph, when he says when the mind comes out, he means when the mind comes out from Atmaswarupa. What is meant by the mind coming out from Atmaswarupa? Atmaswarupa means the real nature of ourselves, what we actually are. Atmaswarupa is that fundamental awareness I am. So long as in sleep we remain just as Atmaswarupa, we are just that pure awareness I am, nothing more than that. But in waking and dream, we don't literally come out of that because there's nowhere outside that to come, but it's as if we rise out of that because as mind or ego, we rise from that fundamental awareness I am, we rise as I am this body, I am so-and-so, I am such and such a person. So that is what he means by the mind coming out from Atmaswarupa. As Bhagavan made clear elsewhere, there is actually only one awareness. When that one awareness remains as it is aware just of itself. That we can say it is facing itself alone. There's nothing else for it to face. So the awareness that is aware of itself alone, that is our real nature. That is Atmaswarupa. But when we rise as ego, that is, it's not, Atmaswarupa just remains as it is, but some false entity appears as ego. This ego is nothing but a false entity. It borrows its awareness from the fundamental awareness I am. Because as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am. That clear awareness I am is there. But instead of being aware of ourselves just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am so-and-so. And consequently, we're aware of other things. The awareness of other things comes only when we're aware of ourselves as a body. That's why he says in that 4th paragraph, when the mind comes out from Atmaswarupa, the world appears. That is, it's only when we rise as mind or ego and take ourselves to be a body, but we experience a world. We never experience any world without experiencing ourselves to be a body in that world. In dream, for example, when we're dreaming, we experience a dream world and we experience ourselves as if we were a body within that dream world. So it's only when we experience ourselves as a body, but we experience a world. So when we rise as ego, we experience a world. And when we experience a world, we consequently experience dukkha. Dukkha means dissatisfaction. And later on in this 14th paragraph, he says, Jagam embadu nineve. What is called the world is nothing but thought. That is, the whole world we see is nothing but our own mental fabrication. In sleep, we see a vast universe and so many, in dream, there seems to be history, geography, science, astrophysics, and so all the world in dream it seems to be just like this present world. So in that vast world we create in a dream, where is all that existing? It's only in our own mind. It's only a fabrication of our own mind. Like that, Bhagavan says, this world is a fabrication of our own mind. It consists of nothing but thought. And then he says, Jagam Marayam Podu, when the world disappears, Adavdu Ninevatra Podu, that is, when thought ceases, Manam Anandate Anubhavikindradu. That is, the world ceases and thought, world and thought cease. What happens to the mind merges back and remains as it actually is, as Atma-swarupa. Therefore, it experiences ananda, happiness. We know that from our experience every day in sleep. And every day in sleep, this mind subsides back into, it merges back into that fundamental awareness I am, and we're perfectly happy. And then in the last sentence, he says, Jagam Tondram Podu, Adu Dukate Anubhavikindradu. When the world appears, that, meaning the mind, experiences misery. So what happens is, when we remain as we actually are, we are perfectly happy. When we rise as mind or ego, we take ourselves to be a body, we consequently see a world, and we experience dukkham. Dukkham means dissatisfaction. Why are we dissatisfied? Because so long as we see a world, we are aware of ourselves as a body. That is, it's only when we limit ourselves within the confines of a body that we consequently see a world. And we are therefore dissatisfied. Why are we dissatisfied? Because what we actually are is infinite, eternal, and unlimited sukham, happiness, satisfaction. When we limit ourselves, we no longer experience the infinite happiness that we actually are. That is, as this finite entity that takes itself to be a small body, how can we experience infinite happiness? Whatever little happiness we may experience in this life, or even in the highest of heavens, it's still limited. And it is limited because it's mixed with dukkham, with dissatisfaction. That there will always be dissatisfaction until we know ourselves as we actually are. So in order to be free of all dissatisfaction, all dukkha, it's necessary for oneself to know oneself, as Bhagavan concludes. Therefore, and for that, the principal means is this investigation, who am I? That is why I said this first paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, which, as I say, wasn't part of the answers that Bhagavan gave to Shiv Kashampalai. He added it as an introduction to this key text of his teachings. And it also serves as an introduction to his whole teaching, because this is what his teachings are all about. His teachings are all about how can we regain that happiness, or it's not even regaining it because we've never actually lost it, but when we rise as ego, we seem to have lost the infinite happiness that we actually are. How to regain that? We regain it every day in sleep. But the problem with sleep, we come out of sleep again. Why do we come out of sleep again? Because ego hasn't been annihilated. In order to annihilate that, as ego, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. As soon as we as ego know ourselves as we actually are, because as ego, we cannot know ourselves as we actually are. By knowing ourselves as we actually are, ego is thereby destroyed. Why can ego never experience itself as it actually is? Because ego is nothing but the false awareness, I am this body. When this I, that is now aware of itself as I am this body, sees itself as it actually is, it thereby merges back into its source, and what remains is our real nature, which is unlimited happiness. So that is what Bhagavan teachings are all about. So what are all living beings seeking? They're seeking nothing but that unalloyed happiness. The problem is we're seeking happiness in the wrong way. So anyone who is serious about seeking happiness, Bhagavan's teachings are for them. We are all serious about seeking happiness, but Unfortunately, unless we blessed with the clarity of mind to recognize that happiness doesn't lie in external things. Happiness can be, we can experience that unlimited happiness only by knowing ourselves. We will not yet be ready to come to Bhagavan's path, but sooner or later, as Bhagavan says in the 8th verse of Arunachya Ashtakam, just like the water that is evaporated from the ocean cannot rest until it returns to the ocean. It's evaporated as clouds, it rains on the mountains, it flows down the mountains, joins a river. If it's lucky, it gets taken straight to the ocean. If it's unlucky, it gets caught in a dam, and it may get evaporated again and have to go round and round. But soon, there's no place of rest for the water, no place of permanent rest. It may attain a temporary rest in a lake or a reservoir or something, but permanent rest it can find only in the ocean. Likewise, we can find permanent rest only by returning to our source. That's one analogy he gives in that verse. The other analogy is just like a bird flying in the sky cannot find rest until it returns to earth. That is, so long as it's flying around in the sky, there's no place in the sky for it to rest. In order to rest, it needs to return to where it came from. It needs to go back the way it came. Likewise, we need to go back the way we came. Where did we come from? We came only from that fundamental awareness I am, our own real nature. We need to go back the way we came, as Bhagavan often used to say. In other words, the mind which is now facing outwards needs to be turned back to face inwards, and thereby we need to subside back into the source from which we rose. And being subsided in that source, as he says in verse 10 of Upadesha, that is karma and yoga, that is bhakti and jnana, that is all spiritual paths. The goal of all spiritual paths is nothing but that subsidence in our, for us to subside and to remain forever in our source, in and as our source. In other words, just being as I am. Elena, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, Michael. Hello.
Hi. Hello.
First of all, thank you very much for everything you do. And I would like to ask a question like this. What would you say to this, that our ego is just wrong direction of our attention? We direct our attention to the wrong direction, and that is why we appear. I read Yoga Vasishtha, and it is, I mean, I quite accept the idea, let's say, that everything is just whole one, pure self-awareness, and within somehow, in this self-awareness, something is going on, which is not even going on, but because of some reason which even doesn't exist, because of something, as we called, for example, appearing of ego, rising, we rise as ego. Somehow I think, I don't remember whether it was said in Yoga Vasishtha, maybe not, because I tried to find it, I didn't find it. But
yes, please continue.
It was said about this wrong direction of attention. I just would like to,
yes,
I would like to just ask whether ego is this wrong direction. I mean, that is why I quite understand that principle means to regain or to be this whole again, to be just pure self-awareness as we are. We have to redirect our attention back towards ourselves.
Yes.
And this is the only way. So, I like very much this from Ula Dunar Padu, I think, Brahman, in verse 32, and you sometimes, from time to time, you in your videos you mention this verse 32, where he says that when we are said that Tattvam Asi, you are that, you immediately have to direct, to ask, who am I? Yes, but somehow it is not that natural, because we take this you are that like as it is. I mean, as something that is granted. That, and we don't just, okay, we are that and that's all, and we do some practices and so on, but we don't direct immediately our attention back, so we become this that again. To me, it is a real some miracle. Even I don't know whether in spiritual circles it takes place. This amazement of what is going on. It even doesn't go in. It is not going on. I mean, within this self-awareness, but these miracles happen. And also, I just want to share with you this. It was many years ago. I read that ancient Greeks, they said that when you see something, when you look at something, when you see something, you create this something. So you create the world through your seeing with your eyes. Your eyes themselves create this world. So you can stop creating, just stop in seeing it. And when we create this world, we believe it. So it's not just okay, let's stop seeing world. Let's immediately 180 degrees return, direct our attention inwards. It doesn't work like this, because we believe what we see. So my question actually is whether this wrong direction of our attention is the ego, this phantom ego, because how attention can be anything, just nothing. I mean,
what you said is yes, that is absolutely correct. That is, our own real nature is to be aware of ourself alone, not to be aware of anything else. Because in the view of pure awareness, there is nothing else. That alone exists. But when we rise as ego, the very nature of ego is to be constantly directing its attention away from itself. That is what Bhagavan means in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, when he describes ego as a formless phantom. It's formless because it's got no form of its own. It's a phantom because it's got no substance of its own. So when we rise as ego, the ego will always usurp things. Since it has nothing of its own, it cannot stand without usurping other things. So first it needs to usurp a substance. The substance, it's seeming, as ego, we seem to exist and we seem to be aware. So that seeming substance and that seeming existence and seeming awareness, it borrows from Satchit, from our real nature, which is just pure being awareness. So we borrow our existence from Satchit and our awareness from Satchit. So as ego, we're aware of ourselves as I am. Awareness of ourselves as I am, that is the nature of Satchit, which is our real nature. But as ego, we are not just aware of ourselves as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. So we usurp I am as if it's our own, and we usurp the body as if it's our own. When I say we here, I'm referring to ego. So Bhagavan says in that verse, he describes, as I say, he describes ego as a formless phantom. So how this formless phantom, somehow it seems to exist. Bhagavan says, Bhagavan isn't saying how it comes into existence. He's just describing here what is the nature of ego. He says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. What this means is grasping form is the very nature of ego. What does grasping form mean? Ego itself is a formless phantom, so it can grasp forms only by attending to things other than itself. That all forms are things other than ego. Even this body is not ego. Ego is that which takes this body to be I. And this body doesn't mean just this material form. All the five sheaths, the body, the life, the mind, the intellect, and the will, none of these are all forms. They're things, that even our desires, our likes, our dislikes, these are forms. These are things other than ourselves. So we grasp all of these and stand. And coming into existence, we grasp these things. As soon as we come into existence, we grasp these things. Grasping these things, we stand. Grasping these things, grasping and feeding on these things. That is, the first form we grasp is the form of a body. There are five sheaths. Then, having taken this body to be I, we then consequently see so many other forms. We see this whole world. And we grasp all these things. And as you say, we take all these things to be real. Why? Because what is actually real is only ourselves. That is, we alone actually exist. When we take ourselves to be this body seems to be real. This body seems to be existing. And since this body is a part of this vast universe, the whole universe seems to be real. So the reality of this world and the reality of this body, they borrow their reality, their seeming existence only from us, from ourselves. But so long as we take this body to be I, this will all seem real. When our identification with this body is severed, this will no longer seem to be real. That is, so long as we're dreaming, the dream body and the dream world seem to be perfectly real. As soon as we wake up, in other words, as soon as we leave one dream and come to another dream, the previous dream no longer seems to be real. We're immediately after, oh, it was just a dream. What do we mean when it was just a dream? It wasn't real. It was just a figment, it was just a fabrication of my own mind. Why are we able to recognize that now, but we weren't able to recognize it while we were experiencing that dream? Because while we were experiencing that dream body seemed to be I. So the dream body seemed to be real, and hence the whole dream world seemed to be real. It ceases to seem real only when our identification with it is severed. So all this seems real only because of our identification with this body. And what Bhagavan calls in that verse 25, grasping form, is exactly what you say. It's attending to things other than ourselves. And how do those other things come into existence? Are they existing there before we rise as ego? No. The dream world doesn't exist before we start dreaming it. It is by our seeing it, but it is created. It's not even by the eyes, because the eyes are, even to say the eyes have created this is wrong, because the eyes of themselves are part of this body, which is a part of this world. It is only ego has created all this. The seer, the witness, the one who is seeing all this, the perceiver, is the creation of everything that is perceived. So it is it's our very nature as ego to be constantly attending to other things. So in order to destroy our ego nature and to restore ourselves to our real nature, we need to cease attending to anything else and turn our attention back within. So what you say, that is perfectly correct. That is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. That is the fundamental principle of Bhagavan's teaching, is that the nature of ego is to be always attending to other things. To the extent that we turn our attention back within, we shed our ego nature and return to our real nature. So when we are practicing self-investigation, what is it that is investigating itself? It's only we as ego. It's only as ego that we investigate ourselves. But to the extent that we go deep in this investigation, we shed our ego nature. And when we finally see ourselves, become aware of ourselves as we actually are, we cease to be ego altogether. Ego is completely obliterated. So completely obliterated, when we finally eradicate ego, we will then clearly know there was never any such thing as ego. Because, why? Because our real nature is always as it is. As we actually are, even now, we are just perfectly happy, perfectly peaceful, and just being as we always are. Because our real nature is not only infinite, it is eternal, and it is immutable. It never undergoes any change whatsoever. So that is the unchanging screen on which this whole show of subject and object, ego and all these phenomena, all this appears only on that screen of a fundamental awareness I am.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that actually the whole idea, the whole method is to withdraw our attention from these things, from everything that from our thoughts, from this visible world, from everything. I mean, to change habit. Because, yes. As I understand, because I mean that the funniest thing is, I think we can say it is funny actually, that everything is ajata already, and within this ajata, we do something. It was very strange. Yeah. I have to say that
ajata, yes, ajata is the truth even now. But yes, it's not our experience.
Yes,
but there's one thing you said, we need to withdraw our attention from other things. True, we do need to, but that's not sufficient.
No, yes. I mean that, yes, of course. Because yes, you want to say that we have to at the same time direct our attention towards I, because and actually through ego, this is the only way to get. I mean, to realize this truth. So because we don't know, because all other things are just. Things that were invented, were projected by ego. So we have to just redirect completely our attention inside. But anyway, I was just thinking about how it is at all possible to have all this game, all this within ajata, within everything. And it's interesting how also Bhagavan gives us his teachings, because again he is being that realized, I mean, that he is this pure self-awareness.
Yes.
And he right now is in this truth, and he is truth. But somehow he has to, from Drishti, just explain to us these methods. I mean, tell us, and as all scriptures say, that there is a world. For example, starting from this first sound that created all this world, that created everything, and the more we look in wrong direction, the deeper we go into this illusory creation. So the harder to redirect us back to our source. So I mean that. Somehow, yes, it is simple. It is simple from the point of self-enquiry. Yes, the only principle means just ask for my. Yes,
it is all extremely simple. The only problem is we are not yet ready to let go of everything. You ask, how is all this possible in ajata? None of this is possible in ajata. In ajata says nothing has ever arisen, nothing has ever appeared. That is why Bhagavan didn't teach ajata. Bhagavan said the ultimate truth is ajata. He said his experience is ajata. He said our ultimate experience will be ajata. But that is not his teaching. His teaching is drishti shrishti. Why? Because he begins Uludinapti with the words, the first word of the first clause of the main text is Nam Ulhum Kandalal, because we see the world. If we didn't see the world, there wouldn't be a problem, but we do see the world. So our experience of this world is a complete contradiction of ajata. So teaching ajata would be useless, because in ajata, nothing has ever arisen. There's no one to teach, no one to be taught anything. There's no one to teach anything. So ajata is not a teaching. Ajata is a final experience. That is our own real nature. What Bhagavan came to give is a practical teaching. Now we've got ourselves in a mess. How do we get in this mess and how to get out of it? We got into this mess by raising his ego. We can get out of it only by turning our attention back within and attending to ourselves. I'll just clarify, you've understood this, but for others who haven't understood, why is withdrawing our attention from other things not sufficient? Every day when we sleep, we withdraw our attention from other things. But we end up in a state of manolaya. That is, merely by withdrawing our attention from other things, we don't thereby eradicate ego. The yogis, by all their pranayama and meditation techniques and everything, they also attain a state that they call nivikalpa samadhi, which Bhagavan said is a state of manolaya, just like sleep. That is of no use for spiritual progress, because so long as you're in manolaya, it's just like you're taking a rest on your journey, but you're not progressing on the journey. We need to progress on the journey. We can progress on the journey only in the states of waking and dream, because it's only in the states of waking and dream that we can turn our attention within. In the state of manolaya, there's nothing other than ourselves, so we just remain as we actually are. There's no ego or mind to do any sadhana. This ego needs to be turning its attention within in order to weaken and eventually destroy its Vishaya vasanas. So merely giving up attention to other things results in manolaya. Manolaya is like a state of suspension. Nothing is happening there. But sooner or later we pop up again, because ego hasn't been destroyed. And when we pop up, all our Vishaya vasanas pop up along with us, because these Vishaya vasanas are our very nature as ego. So we need to work on eradicating ego. And we can, eradicating these Vishaya vasanas, which we can do completely only by eradicating ego. But in order to eradicate ego, we need to greatly weaken our Vishaya vasanas. That is why this practice of self-investigation and self-surrender is prescribed. This is the most effective means to weaken the Vishaya vasanas, and it is the only means to eradicate ego, which is the root of all the Vishaya vasanas. Before the break, you referred to Lorraine's question, but when I saw the messages, I saw that before that there was another question for me. So I'll deal with that one. This is from Ron. What he wrote is, when one practices self-inquiry, who am I? Is one investigating the ego I am, or the I am, the pure awareness? That's one question. So I'll answer that, and then he's got another question also. There are not two eyes. There is only one eye. If you mistake a rope to be a snake, and say to Bhagavan, oh, see, there's a snake, Bhagavan will see clearly it's just a rope. So he will tell you, no, it's not a rope, it's only a snake. Look at it carefully. When he says, look at it carefully, if you ask him, what am I to look at carefully, the rope or the snake? That question has no meaning, because there are not two things there, a rope and a snake. There's only one thing. What is there is only a rope. You mistakenly see it as a snake. So if you look at it carefully enough, you will see, oh, it's not a snake, it's only a rope. Likewise, there is only one eye. Now we experience that one eye mixed with adjuncts. Now, instead of experiencing that one eye as just I am, we experience it as I am so-and-so, I am Ron, or I am Michael, or I am whoever. So it's not that there are two different eyes. There's only one eye. Now we mistakenly experience that one eye mixed with adjuncts as I am this person, I am so-and-so, I am this body. So there's only one eye to investigate. If we look at this eye that now seems to be an ego, we will see that it is just the pure awareness I am. So I hope that adequately answered that question. The next question you asked was, is self-inquiry or Atma-vichara similar to watching the thoughts which are illumined by the light of consciousness? In other words, being the witness consciousness. No, it is not. This is a misunderstanding that many people have. The witness consciousness, that is, the term witness, is a term that is often used in Vedantic texts. The Sanskrit word is sakshi. Bhagavan clarified, or Bhagavan distinguished two different senses in which the term sakshi is used. That is, when sakshi is used in the sense of perceiver, it is only ego. It's only ego that sees all these things. When sakshi, when our real nature or Brahman is referred to as the sakshi, it doesn't mean that our real nature is the perceiver of all this. In that context, sakshi simply means sanadi, presence. So it's only in the presence of pure awareness, which is Brahman or our real nature, it's only in the presence of pure awareness that all this appears. But it's not in the view of pure awareness, it's only in the view of ego. Pure awareness is never aware of anything other than itself. So this term witness consciousness, because people fail to distinguish these two senses in which the term witness is used, it has led to, there's a lot of confusion among Advaita. People are very learned in Advaita. They don't recognize this distinction. As far as I'm aware, only Bhagavan made this distinction very clear. But there are two senses in which the term sakshi is used. We need to understand in which sense it's being used. When it's used in the sense of the perceiver, that which is aware of all this, that is only ego. So that was the first point to clarify. The other point is, so long as we are watching thoughts, in fact, we are watching thoughts all the time. We don't have to deliberately witness thoughts. The nature of ego is to be constantly watching thoughts, of constantly attending to things other than itself. All thoughts, other than the first thought I, are other than ourselves. So attending to other things, attending to thoughts is not Atma-vichara, it's Anatma-vichara. In other words, it's not self-investigation or self-inquiry, it's investigating or inquiring into things other than ourselves. That is not what we are here for. We are here only to investigate ourselves. So it is not watching the thoughts, but watching the thinker. The thinker is the first thought, I. So in that sense, it's watching a thought, but only one thought, that thought I. And that is a thought in a very special sense. And that is this what Bhagavan often described ego as the first thought, the thought called I. But he clarified it is a thought unlike all other thoughts, because whereas all other thoughts are objects, this thought is the subject. In other words, other thoughts are jada. They have no awareness. But what is aware of them all is only this first thought I. So this is the awareness, only thought that is endowed with awareness. So what we need to be attending to is not any other thoughts, but only to ourselves. The first thought I, the thinker of all other thoughts. In other words, we have to turn our attention away from the thoughts towards the one who is aware of the thoughts. Who is aware of the thoughts? Only ourselves, but ourselves as ego. But if we look at this ego carefully enough, we will see, oh, it's just pure awareness. Just like if we look at this snake carefully enough, we'll see, oh, it's just a rope. It never was a snake. This pure awareness never was ego, but now it seems to be ego, and consequently it seems to be aware of other things. All other things, all phenomena, all objects appear only in the view of the subject. That is the witness as perceiver. If we turn our attention back to investigate who is this witness, we will cease to be the perceiver of other things, and we will remain as pure awareness, which is the witness in the sense of the mere presence. Just like the screen is the witness on which the pictures appear. The screen isn't aware of the pictures, it's aware of well, the screen isn't aware of anything, but in this analogy, the screen is the pure awareness I am. So that pure awareness I am is not aware of anything other than itself. It's aware, just I am. That which is aware of other things is only ego. So this ego needs to turn its attention back. So long as it's attending to anything other than itself, there's subject and there's object. When it attends only to the subject is a subject only so long as it's attending to objects. So when we attend to ourselves, we as egos subside and dissolve back into our source. And then what remains is what we actually are, which is pure awareness. So that is your questions. I hope that adequately answers your questions, Ron. Lorraine, your question was, when I die, go into deep sleep or faint, the world still exists to other people. So it does exist. Bhagavan always loved the mountain, which still exists. So what Bhagavan says is true, but there's still a world, even though this I does not exist. What do you say to this? Bhagavan said, the world in a dream, if you ask the people in the dream, if you ask the other people, when I go to sleep, do you still see this world? They'll say, oh yes, of course the world exists, whether you're seeing it or not. If you faint, if you say, but if I faint, will the world still exist? They'll say, yes, the world will still exist. What happens if I die? We'll still be here and we'll see the world, even if you die. So long as you're dreaming, you'll be convinced by what those other people say. But when you wake up, what do you recognize, oh, it was all just a dream. So all those other people who assured you but that world exists, even when you go to sleep, those people are themselves a part of the world whose existence is in question. Bhagavan said, calling upon the testimony of others to prove that the world exists when we don't see it is like calling on the testimony of a thief to testify that he didn't commit the robbery. But of course, the thief will say, no, I didn't commit the robbery. If you take his word for it, you're going to be fooled. Likewise, if you take the testimony of other people that the world exists when you don't see it, you are allowing this world to fool you. The world will, Bhagavan said, the world laughs at you for saying it exists when you don't see it. Because, of course, Bhagavan said that jokingly, because the world is just an appearance. It exists so long as you see it. When you don't see it, it doesn't exist. Just like the dream world exists only so long as you see it. When you don't see it, it doesn't exist. The next person, Krish Bawa, you have your hand raised. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Namaste, Michael.
Namaste.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, so a couple of things with regards to Bhagavan. He says that when the mind disappears, the world disappears.
Yes.
What does that look like in the waking state? Because obviously in the deep sleep state, we know that the world disappears. And, all appearances disappear as well. There's no recollection of anything.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like in the waking state?
And in the waking state, the mind or ego is there. That's why we call it the waking state.
Yeah, but when the mind, when the mind sinks into the ego, when the ego sinks into the heart, yes, and the world, and it disappears. But obviously, yeah, are we talking about the waking state where
that is, it is in the waking state or dream state only, but ego exists. So it's only in these states that we can investigate ourselves. When we investigate ourselves, to the extent to which we turn our attention towards ourselves, yeah, the world disappears. The world recedes into the background of our awareness. Because we still have attachment, we still have Vishaya vasanas, we don't completely let go of the world. So we are not actually turning the full 180 degrees. Our aim is to turn 180 degrees, to completely turn our back on the world and to attend only to ourselves. But because of the strength of our Vishaya vasanas, we are not willing to let go of the world entirely. So we are maybe turning 40 degrees, 70 degrees, 90 degrees, even 120, 150, 170 degrees. Until we turn the full 180 degrees, there's still a lingering awareness of phenomena. So long as there's the slightest awareness of phenomena, that which is aware of phenomena is only ego. So it's only when we turn 180 degrees, but we are facing ourselves alone and have completely turned our back on the world, so to speak. So in that state, there is no world, there is only ourself.
Yeah, I'm trying to obviously imagine what the world would look like from the point of view when all phenomena does evaporate. Obviously, well, we know.
What we call the world now is what Bhagavan refers to as form. So many different forms.
Yeah.
Forms doesn't mean only the physical forms. All our thoughts, all our feelings, all our likes, dislikes, desires, anything that is distinguishable from any other thing is a form, in the sense in which Bhagavan uses the term, in the sense in which the term is used generally in Indian philosophy. So all forms are things other than ourselves. We experience other forms only when we take ourselves to be a form. So in the view of the jnani, in the view of Bhagavan, what we see as forms is what he sees as himself. What he actually is just that formless awareness I am. So Bhagavan is seeing exactly the same thing we are seeing, but whereas we are seeing it as all these names and forms, he is seeing it just as I am.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because in terms of...
But we cannot grasp that. We cannot grasp that. Yeah. So long as we are seeing forms, we cannot grasp what is that. Every day we experience formlessness in sleep. But when we wake up, our recollection of, we know we existed in sleep. Yes, I was aware, I existed in sleep, and I was aware that I existed in sleep. But what, can you describe the experience in sleep? No, you cannot. You cannot even, the mind cannot grasp what we experienced in sleep. Why? Because what we experienced in sleep was just pure awareness. Now we are aware of that pure awareness as I am this body. We're no longer aware of it as pure awareness, we're aware of it as ego. So as ego, we can never grasp that. So just like we cannot grasp the infinite Satchidananda, happiness, the existence, awareness and happiness that we experienced in sleep, which was infinite and unalloyed, we cannot grasp that now in the waking state, because we've now been saying the ajnana of our present state is clouding the pure jnana of that state. So we cannot, through the glasses of ajnana, through the eyes of ajnana, we cannot see jnana. So what we need to do is to turn our attention back within, thereby see ourselves as we actually are, and shed out this ajnana. It is beyond the grasp of words, it's beyond the grasp of thought, it's beyond the grasp of mind.
Okay, brilliant.
So there's no point in trying to grasp it. If you want to grasp it, grasp yourself. You are that.
Thanks. Can I ask just a quick second question? In terms of key indicators of making spiritual progress with self-inquiry, I remember reading that Bhagavan said that the volume of thoughts, once they start to reduce, that's a sign that you're making some
I think there is some such thing recorded in talks or somewhere. But generally, when people ask Bhagavan about progress, Bhagavan often said, perseverance is the only sign of progress. He said that for a very good reason, because perseverance here means perseverance in the practice of self-investigation and self-surrender. Perseverance is the measure of our bhakti, of our love. If we really love to know and to be what we actually are, we will be persistently trying to attend to ourselves. If we find that our mind is often jumping outwards and so on, that means our love is still lacking. So the persistence, the degree of persistence in that is the extent to which we are persevering in our practice of self-investigation, that is the only sign of progress. That's a much better sign than saying reduction in thought, because according to Bhagavan, this whole world is thought. Even ego is a thought. So how are we to measure whether there are more thoughts or less thoughts? It's all thoughts. So it's really not a very, it's not a clear indicator, but we all, each one of us knows, am I persevering in this self-investigation? I think if we are honest, I think we will all put our hand up and say, no, I'm not persevering enough. Like we are all aware, but we all know we should be attending to ourselves more. So however much we're attending to ourselves, so long as we remain as ego, it's still not sufficient. So if we're honest with ourselves, our perseverance is still lacking. However great our perseverance may be, it is still lacking. When we have that perfect bhakti, that'll be the end of the story. We will turn within, let go of everything else, surrender completely, and ego will be obliterated. But trying to measure our progress, okay, it's useful to aim for more perseverance, but beyond that, trying to measure our progress is of no use. We are on a journey. We know the direction in which we have to travel. Sure. And we know what the goal is. The goal is just to know and to be what we actually are. So the direction of travel, we have to travel towards ourselves. In other words, we have to turn back within. That's all we need know. Whether we are 1 mile from our destination, 100 miles, or 10 years, 10 lifetimes from our destination, doesn't matter. What matters is that we persevere in traveling in that direction. If we travel in that direction, sooner or later we will reach the goal. If we're worrying, how far am I, how near am I, we are thinking of things other than ourselves. Bhagavan says, attend only to yourself. That's all you need worry about. So even to think about whether we are progressing or not progressing is an unnecessary thought. Mm-hmm. To whom is this thought? Me. Okay. Turn my attention back to myself. That's right. All that matters. We should be so one-pointed. Even if we don't have the strength to be constantly attending to ourselves, we should always be giving priority to that. Yes, that's alone important. Nothing else is important. The whole purpose of Bhagavan's teaching is directing me to attend to I. Why do we go on reading Bhagavan's teaching? Why are we talking about Bhagavan's teaching? Because he is constantly stressing to us, we must turn back to I. So it's only, his teachings are the greatest support to us in this journey. So we constantly read his teachings, because if we are really reading his teachings, if we're really thinking about his teachings, what are his teachings all about? They're all about I. So we cannot truly study his teachings or do manana on his teachings without thereby turning our attention back to I. So this should be the sole aim of our life. Whatever actions our body, speech, or mind may be doing, let them do. It doesn't matter. What is the important thing? We must be trying more and more and more to attend to I. That's all that matters.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Yeah, persistence is key. That mentally noted. Thank you very much.
Right. Bala Nagaraju, you're the next one who has your hand raised.
Yeah, Namaste, Mr. Michael Guruji. This is Bala from India.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is actually while Bhagavan was leaving his body, one of the devotee in the Ramana Ashram asked Bhagavan, pray, you have to cure yourself. You are going to leave us, all of us. So you get well soon by praying. You have to cure yourself and get well soon. Why you are not curing yourself, please, Bhagavan? Then Bhagavan replied, for whom I have to cure? For all of, she said, for all of us. Then Bhagavan said, are you there really? Bhagavan said, are you there really? So when we came to know that we are not there here, when we came to know that this physical body, this existence is not real. This is all this is illusionary, as per Bhagavan words, right?
Right. I don't know if Bhagavan actually said that. This is the first time I've ever heard that. What Bhagavan said when people asked him to make people said, Bhagavan, if you have an intention to get well, if you have a sankalpa to get well, you'll get better. So please have that sankalpa. Bhagavan said, I cannot even, there's no one here, there's no one inside here to make any sankalpa at all.
Right. And that's when we came to that consciousness. Bhagavan said, no, you are not for who purpose, like that. What Bhagavan said, when you came to know that in real life existence, I mean ourselves. And that's my first question. The second question is, that's how Bhagavan said you should not prolong the thought. Should not prolong the thought. Should cut it off the thought when it rises in your mind. But thoughts are coming very rapidly and very forcefully. When we cut the thoughts off,
Bhagavan didn't say to cut off thought. What Bhagavan said is, doesn't matter however many thoughts come. As and when each thought comes, investigate to whom it has come.
Yes, exactly.
If we are thinking, oh, I have to cut off this thought, I have to cut off, that is not our aim. Our aim is just to attend to ourselves, because people struggle in meditation trying to get rid of thoughts, but the desire to get rid of thoughts is itself a thought. So trying to get rid of thoughts is not practical. Bhagavan said, all you need to do, don't worry about thoughts. Let any number of thoughts come. What does it matter? Big deal. So what? He literally says that in the sixth paragraph of Who Am I? However many thoughts arise, enna. Enna means what? It's got the same spirit as saying, so what in English, or big deal. So it's not thought should not be our concern. If a thought arises, to whom does it arise? We should welcome thoughts, because thoughts arise to remind us to attend to ourselves. If we welcome them like that and turn our attention back towards ourselves, they won't be a problem at all. The problem is we attend to them. So we have a problem, not the thoughts. So we need to attend to ourselves, not to the thoughts.
Yes, you are right. Exactly. Actually, instead of saying thinking ourselves, the thought to whom it came to, instead of saying that one, I have to say not to prolong. Okay. My next, actually, I asked the first question, Mr. Guruji. Actually, when Bhagavan was leaving his body, so when we came to know that realization in our real life.
Bhagavan has shown us the way. He has taught us, but if we want to know what we actually are, we need to turn our attention within. We need to investigate ourselves and thereby surrender ourselves. He has shown the way. We have to follow that way. When it will reach the goal need not concern us. What we are trying to know is not something in the future. What am I now? So if we think about, oh, will I attain after 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 50 years, 50 lifetimes? Doesn't matter. It's all anya. It's all other than ourselves. The only thing we need to be concerned about is, who am I here and now? We need to be attending to ourselves here and now and not concerned about when it will come. It will, if we persevere in following this path, it will come. When we are ready for it, it will come. The problem is we're not yet ready for it. That means we're not yet willing to let go of everything else. So how to cultivate that willingness to let go, that vairagya? That is by persevering in this practice of self-investigation.
Okay. One more question, Mr. Maharaj.
Yes.
When I woke up from bed, the ego says, hi, Bal, I am also working along with you. When I wake up from bed, ego says, I am woke up along with you. So, is there any types of, actually, I don't know about this. Is there any types of egos in this? Is there any types of egos?
That is, the I that wakes up is ego. Ego wakes up and says, I am Bala. It's not that ego wakes up with Bala. Bala exists only in the view of ego. It is ego who says, I am Bala. Without ego, there's no Bala. In sleep, there's no ego, therefore there's no Bala. As soon as ego rises, it projects and says, it projects Bala and says, I am Bala. And all the problems ensue.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
And the next hand is Srini.
Hi, Michael. Good morning and good afternoon. This is Srini Kopolo. It's just first time joining this satsang. I practice self-inquiry almost every moment. I try my best to do self-inquiry every moment. My question is, it is like when I close my eyes, it is going inwards and doing the self. When I open the eyes, I see the world outside. It is self versus ego. And with all the worldly things, Vishayavasanas and ego, it kind of looks to me like a very realistic. It is kind of all the things is happen in the outside world is very real. And all the things are getting a lot of demand and it get a lot of attention. And it basically takes all the energy going outside activities, like going to the ego.
Yeah.
But I'm always like trying to pull back and say, hey, this is not the one that I'm here for in this world.
Yes.
Every moment, whenever I say it's getting into work or dealing with family, dealing with any situation, anything, any thought comes in, it always like, no, this is not real. This is more of illusion. This is Maya. Come back and say, to whom this is coming in, just go inwards. But it is always a conflict of like,
yeah.
As everyone knows, this is like constant battle between outside and inwards, outward and inwards.
Yes.
And how I know it's perseverance. We are trying it. It's kind of frightening. I would say it's kind of frightening and say, if I close, if I go inwards, kind of like shutting down the ego, kind of like, oh, it seems like as if something is very frightening and said, no, I should not do it. Ego doesn't like it because it doesn't make sense for the ego. It cannot live going inwards.
Yeah.
So how do you get that kind of balance between ego versus like when ego comes very strong and when I have self comes, when self is the real that I want to go in, how do you balance this strong domination of ego and shutting down or not completely taking the thought, but making the self as the primary, making the self as the guru and Ramana and said, hey, can you give more light on that? Yeah.
You say a battle between outside and inside. Actually, to be more precise, the battle is within your own mind. The battle is between your inclination to go out and your inclination to go in. Your
Correct.
inclination to go outwards are what are called Vishaya vasanas. That is the inclination towards Vishayas. The inclination to go within is what is called Sattvasana. So in order to succeed in this path, we need to cultivate Sattvasana and thereby weaken the Vishaya vasanas. That is what we are doing by practicing self-investigation and self-surrender. The more we practice self-investigation and self-surrender, the more we are weakening our Vishaya vasanas and strengthening our Sattvasana. So we just have, there's no other way but just to persevere in this. But because our Vishaya vasanas, which we've cultivated over crores of janmas, innumerable janmas, millions or billions of janmas, we've cultivated these Vishaya vasanas. We cannot root them all out so quickly. Patient perseverance is required. And also, we need to be gentle with ourselves. We can't force ourselves to give up our Vishaya vasanas. So gentle, persistent, gentle and patient perseverance is what is required.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I got that kind of inclinations. Even the going inwards is also inclination. Going outward is also inclination. Both are same. It is not two separate things. It is like one thought.
It's the same ego, but has inclinations to go outwards and inclinations to go inward. The inclination to go inwards, Sattvasana, is what is also called bhakti. And to the extent to which you weaken the Vishaya vasanas, the inclinations to go outwards, the weakened Vishaya vasana, that then the state in which the Vishaya vasanas are weakened is called vairagya. So bhakti and vairagya, they're actually one and the same thing. To the extent you want to love to go within, to that extent you are free of inclination to go outwards. So the whole, how do we cultivate bhakti and vairagya? By this practice.
Yeah, when I go this vairagya path or going inward path more and more, it feels like it is like illusion. It feels like I am going into kind of going away from this worldly things, not doing the my duties like family duties or work duties. It feels like, even though it is not, but it feels like a frightened kind of, oh, am I going in, like going into the Himalayas and going away, escaping from my family life, escaping from my regular duties. It's kind of, it frightens. It's kind of like, oh, is it the right thing? Ego is always kind of dominating. That way I had a conflict. I always get a conflict, but Bhagavan is always helping me.
The thing is, Bhagavan has given us so much help in his teachings. It is natural for us, particularly if we've got family and we seem to have responsibilities in this world, it's natural for us to think, oh, if I'm devoting all my attention to following this spiritual path, what's going to happen to my responsibilities? Who's going to take care of my family? According to Bhagavan, we need not worry about these things at all, because all these things have already been determined by prarabdha. We cannot change what is destined to happen. We cannot change it one iota. And whatever actions you need, supposing it's your prarabdha to have a family and to take care of your family and provide for all their needs, your body, speech, or mind will be made to do those actions that are necessary. You need not concern yourself with that. If you're turning your attention within, your body or mind will be driven by that higher power, by God. He himself will directly take possession of your body. And well, he's already using them. Like, whatever actions we have to do according to prarabdha, we will be made to do. That's what Bhagavan said in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother. Avarava prarabdha prakaram. According to the prarabdha of each one, Adakanavan, he who is for that means God or Guru or Bhagavan, Angangirandu, being there, Atuvipan, will make them act, will make them dance, literally. So we will be made to do whatever actions are necessary for prarabdha to unfold. So we need not worry about these things at all. We need not worry about prarabdha. We need not worry about what's going to happen. It's already determined. Our only responsibility is to surrender ourselves by turning within. But as you say, you talked about fear. So long as we have strong Vishaya vasanas, we are reluctant to let go. And that reluctance will manifest in the form of fear. It's okay, we have to face that fear. And this is where we need, the only practical way to follow this path is gently. Bhagavan often used to say, this path of bhakti and jnana, that's his path, because Bhagavan's path is both bhakti and jnana. This is a very gentle path. Our mind has a strong inclination to go outwards. We have to wean it off that inclination and cultivate this inclination to go inwards. We can do so only by patient and persistent practice, but we need to be very gentle with ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes, we know the mind is inclined to go outwards. It will go outwards, but slowly, slowly. But Bhagavan gave the analogy of a runaway cow.
Yeah.
If you try to chase the cow back into its stall, it's going to, wherever you chase it, it's going to run away. It's a futile effort. But if you just tempt it slowly with some nice green grass, we cajole it back into its stall. That is what we are doing on this path. We are slowly, and Bhagavan's teachings are a great aid in this. If we're constantly reading and thinking about Bhagavan's teachings, he's giving us the encouragement, he's giving us the courage to persevere.
I can see it when I'm in front of my desk. I always have Bhagavan's photo, picture So when I have this kind of conflict, when I look at Bhagavan, he tells me, he'll give me answer. He'll say, yeah, he'll give me the answer.
Just
but
looking at Bhagavan's eyes is sufficient.
I can see that, oh, like I was talking to you, he can give, okay, this is the answer that you're looking for. It completely changes the whole perspective. But one of the things that about the destiny, that I believe in that kind of destined to happen, it will always happen. But our true minds doesn't accept that kind of, oh, it will take care of itself. Bhagavan will take care of family. But we always believe that it is me getting the money, it is me taking care of family, it is me doing it. This ego is very dominantly thinking that it is me running whole world. It is me like ruling the president of United States, like kind of thing, right? But
Such
it is not.
Of ego. Such is the nature of ego. Bhagavan says in Uludunapadu, in verse 25, Uru Patriundam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping form and grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes. So this is the very nature of ego. Ego thinks everything depends on it. It's true, everything does depend on ego, because as Bhagavan says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. But everything depends on ego, not in the sense in which we take it.
Thank you so much. And this kind of dominant or fear, frightened, that's where I always have that one. Bhagavan, when I look at Bhagavan, when I close, I get it. But when I open it, when I don't look at Bhagavan, when it is dominant in this kind of worldly things, that takes a lot of energy, almost 90% of it. And that's where the practice is going deeper and deeper. Thank you so much, Michael.
Fear
I
will
feel
always
blessed to
be there. Fear, so long as we have desire and attachment, there will be fear. If you desire anything, you fear to lose it. If you're attached to anything, you fear to lose it. So this fear is just a manifestation of the strength of our desires and attachments. And our desires and attachments in their seed form are Vishaya Vasanas. These Vishaya Vasanas are what we are weakening by practicing this path that Bhagavan taught us, this path of self-investigation and self-surrender. So that's all we need to do.
I always wanted to go into the extreme of Vairagya, but it always like has a kind of pulling back. This ego pulls back and said, this is not the right thing. That's not the right thing. It always shut me down.
Vairagya is not something we can cultivate overnight. We can cultivate it only by patient and persistent practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have to be realistic with ourselves.
Yes.
First thing, we have to recognize the strength of our Vishaya Vasanas. And we have to recognize Bhagavan has given us a great weapon to deal with these Vishaya Vasanas. But to apply the means that Bhagavan has given us requires patience and perseverance.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. Right. Michael, you've got your hand raised.
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, yes.
This is a question about, which I thought might relate to something you mentioned earlier about Manalaya or Nirvikalpa. Can I just read something from what Nisargadatta said from the book I Am That?
Okay.
When the mind is kept away from its occupations, it becomes quiet. If you do not disturb this quiet and stay in it, you find that it is permeated with a love and light you have never known, and yet you recognize it at once as your true nature. Once you have passed through this experience, you will never be the same man again. And it goes on a bit further. I'm not saying this is self-inquiry as Bhagavan describes it, but I just wanted some clarification on the state of no mind, where mind ceases altogether. Therefore, one is not directing the mind to its source or doing any self-inquiry. The sense of I has disappeared as well, just leaving awareness alone. Some of the New Age speakers, I think, refer to it as resting as awareness. So my question is specifically, as Bhagwan spoke of this particular state, and does he recommend this as a practice, even if it's ad hoc, or is it manalaya? And
regarding the passage you quoted from Nisargadatta, I don't know the context in which he said that, but taken out of context, that there's something lacking there. That is, it's not just a matter of keeping the mind away from objects. We keep the mind away from objects every night when we fall asleep, but it results only in manolaya. In Bhagavan's path, our aim is not to keep the mind away from objects. Our aim is only to attend to the subject. If we attend only to the subject, thereby the mind is kept away from objects. But merely keeping the mind away from objects by itself will only lead to manolaya. So Bhagavan put emphasis not on giving up thoughts or giving up objects. He put emphasis on holding on to I. If you hold on to I, thereby you let go of everything else. So if we want, so we shouldn't concern ourselves about objects, about thoughts, about anything other than ourselves. They are not our concern. Let them come or go. It's no concern about it. Our only concern should be attending to I. If we attend to I, slowly, our Vishaya vasanas will be weakened, and we will become more and more willing to surrender ourselves, to go deeper and deeper within. Eventually, we will merge back in our source, and what remains is what always exists. That cannot be described in words. The only words that can describe it is I am. Just I am, not anything other than I am. Just that fundamental awareness I am. That's all that remains. But that is all there actually exists. And that is the fullness of Sat Chit Ananda. Infinite existence, infinite awareness, infinite happiness. That's all we need to be concerned about. Everything else is just an appearance. So let us leave this appearance by holding on to I. Merely leaving the appearance is no use, because we do that every day in sleep. What we need to do is hold on to I more and more and more. That is where the emphasis should lie. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. But you know, like, it's such a, I experienced it once, and it's such a joyous state. It did happen, as Nisargadatta stated, and this arising of the unconditional love.
Anything that happened,
and it sparked like a spontaneous knowing of what self action to take at that time. I don't know how. It just came over me.
Yeah. Okay. You say something happened. You say you experienced it. Anything that happens, anything that you experience once, is something that has appeared and disappeared. That is not the reality. What we are investigating is we are not looking for any new experience. We are looking for that which is ever existing, which is only I am. Anything that appears and disappears is unreal. What is real is what is ever existing. That is what we are searching for. That is what we are investigating. So let's not, whatever may have happened, whatever wonderful experiences we may have, they are all irrelevant in the final analysis. All that matters, because what we are seeking is not experiences. We are seeking the truth, the reality that underlies the experiencer. Who is experiencing all this? To whom did all this happen? Who had this experience? That is, we should be constantly turning our attention back to ourselves.
Yeah, thanks for that. You've asked the question. It's makes sense, because I didn't think it went in line with Bhagwan's teachings of self-inquiry.
Yeah,
as I understand it.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, right.
That's good help.
Lorraine, you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks. Am I correct in understanding what you've said, that when Bhagavan experienced the world, he saw himself,
Yes.
which is beyond my comprehension.
It's beyond the comprehension of all of us.
That for us, in our weak, poorest state of being,
Yeah.
If we have compassion, for instance, for somebody by putting ourselves in their position,
Yes.
and trying to be them, to understand what they've experienced, whether that's something nice or something sad or something ugly, we can somehow have some sort of love or understanding. Yeah. And it's a kind of helps us on our path to, yes. Like, I mean, I can't understand how Bhagavan loved Arunachala, but with people, there's something closer. I can, yes. Yes. Pretend, or even a dog, you know, or a flower. Yes. I can feel that beauty or whatever. So is that something that is useful?
Yes, certainly. That is, what is the opposite of compassion or empathy? It is hard-hearted selfishness. That is, if ego is very strong, along with strong ego, it will have strong desires and everything. But strong ego will care only about itself. So as ego, we identify ourselves with this person. So only this person matters. I am Michael, so I care only about Michael. Let the rest of the world go to the dogs. I don't care. So long as I'm happy, that's all that matters. So by hook or by crook or by any means, I will satisfy my desires. I don't care about other people. Even if I have to exploit people, it doesn't matter. It only matters. That is the very opposite of compassion. That is because the ego is very strong. As we progress in this spiritual path, our mind gets purified, and the sense of I alone matter gets weaker and weaker. Still, I identify myself as Michael, but if I see Lorraine suffering, it will pain me to see Lorraine suffering. So I begin to feel compassion. I begin to feel empathy. So then I can no longer take advantage of anyone else. So this is how the love and compassion and empathy grows to the extent that ego subsides. In the case of Bhagavan, because ego was completely eradicated, in the Bible it is said, Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. But how can we love our neighbor as ourselves until we see our neighbor as ourselves? So in order to literally love our neighbor as ourselves, we have to literally see our neighbor as ourselves. Bhagavan saw everything as himself. That's why he had unlimited love for all. For human beings, for animals, for good people, for bad people, for rich people, for poor people, for learned people, for uneducated people, for even the creatures we will usually be afraid of, like hornets. Bhagavan was so compassionate, but he allowed those hornets to sting his thigh. When accidentally his thigh brushed against their nest, he felt empathy, he felt compassion for them, because this leg had done an offending action. So let this leg take its punishment. So much unlimited love Bhagavan had for all. So the love and compassion, anyone who thinks that they are making progress in the spiritual path, who doesn't feel love and compassion for others, is deluding themselves. Naturally, if we look outwards and see others, we will feel love and compassion for them. And when ego is completely annihilated and we see only ourselves, we will love everything as ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
But we can't grasp this by our mind. As Bhagavan says in verse, I think, 31 of Ulajunhaptu, how to conceive the state of those who do not know anything other than themselves. There he's talking about his own state. In his view, there are no others.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Right. But for that, if we want to attain that, we have to this ego has to subside more and more and more. Only when ego is completely eradicated can we actually experience the state of Bhagavan. But the more this ego subsides, the more we will come close to that, the more we will feel love and compassion, and truly we will care for others.
Right. Thanks.
But what is the best thing we can do for others? The root of all problems is ego. We cannot solve the problem of ego in others. First, let us solve this problem of ego in ourselves. So turning within and surrendering ourselves is the best help we can do for others. If we truly care for others, we should try to eradicate this ego.
Right. Thank you.
Right. Because it's only ego that creates this sense of separation between oneself and others.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Right. Kiran?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I just have two questions. The first one is, if you can just explain in the context that Bhagavan uses the term Arunachala Ramana. That's one thing. And the second thing is, I know you have, Bhagavan always recommended going around Arunachala, circumambulating Arunachala. You have done it countless times with Sadhu Om. Like, is there any specific way to do it, or just do it by keeping Arunachala in the mind?
Well, as far as Giri Pradakshina is concerned, it should be done, as you say. Pradakshina means circumambulating with the object you're circumambulating to the right. So yes, it's going, viewed from above, it's going clockwise around the hill, and it is to be done barefoot. But those are the two requirements. And of course, when we do it, going round the hill, Bhagavan has said it will benefit anyone, even if you don't believe in it, it will benefit you. But of course, when we go round, the more our mind is dwelling on Bhagavan, his teachings, on his love for Arunachala, and most important, though Arunachala appears outwardly in the form of a hill, what actually is Arunachala? Arunachala is that which is shining in our heart as I. So trying to keep our attention on I, that is also very important. But the basic requirements are we walk around, keeping it to our right and walking barefoot. Regarding Arunachala Ramana, in the final verse of Arunachala Aksharam, Bhagavan sings, Malaya Lita Arunachala Ramana, Malaya Lita Arunachala Ramana, then Malaya Lita Arunachala. So there he addresses Arunachala as Arunachala Ramana. We can explain it in various ways. Ramana means the Lord, it means the lover, it means the one who gives happiness. So he's addressing Arunachala as his beloved, his beloved Arunachala. We can take it there in that sense. It's also, for us devotees, Arunachala Ramana has a very special significance because Bhagavan has sung enough in Arunachala Stuti Panchakam to make it very clear that though he worshipped Arunachala in the form of a hill, he experienced Arunachala as himself. He indicated his soft Arunachala is that which is shining in the heart of all as I. So Bhagavan is Arunachala in human form, and Arunachala is Bhagavan in hill form. They are one and the same. Though the forms are different, the reality, the porul, the vastu, the substance is one. They are one and the same. And that is our own real nature. That is what we actually are. Another context in which Bhagavan used the term Arunachala Ramana, when a devotee wrote a verse in Malayalam asking Bhagavan whether because there were some devotees who said Bhagavan is an incarnation of Subramanya, and others disagreed. No, he's an incarnation of Shiva. Everyone had their own view. According to who was their favorite god, they will say that Bhagavan is So when someone asks, are you Subramania, or are you this or that? Which god are you, basically? But was the meaning of the verse. Bhagavan wrote another verse in Malayalam in the same meter, and he immediately after, or very soon after that, he translated the verse into Tamil in the same meter. What he says in that verse is, because he's asked, who are you? He doesn't even say I. He doesn't mention I. He simply says, Arunachala Ramana. We have to take it that as he's using that name to refer to himself. Arunachala Ramana is the Paramatman, the supreme self or supreme spirit, the ultimate self, who blissfully exists as awareness in the cave of the heart, lotus, of all separate jīvas, beginning with Hari. Hari means Vishnu. So from Vishnu down to the lowest ant, in the heart of all sentient beings, that which is shining as awareness, that which is shining as I, that is Arunachala Ramana. That he says in the first two lines of that verse. Then in the next two lines, he says, Parivalula Muruha. That means heart melting with love. When one enters the cave where that supreme absolute dwells, the eye of awareness will be opened and this truth will be known. It will reveal itself. So Bhagavan isn't just satisfied to say who he is. How can we experience that? We can experience it only by turning within with a heart melting with love and thereby merge in him. If you don't mind, I'll just digress here because recently someone asked a comment on one of my videos. In fact, I think on two different videos, they asked more or less the same comment, was about this particular phrase Bhagavan uses here. Parival ulam uruha. Parival means by love. Ulam here means heart or mind, or we can take it as referring also to ego in this context. Uruha means melting. So this friend asks, is it necessary to have emotion when we investigate ourselves? So I will answer that question here because you bring up this, because you raise the context of this verse, it's a good opportunity to answer this question. No, when practicing emotion, that is, emotion is something, an experience on the surface level of the mind. Our aim is to go very deep within. When Bhagavan says heart melting with love, as I say, the word he uses there for heart is ulam. Ulam can also be mind. We can also take it in this context as ego. So what he means by heart melting with love is having so much love to turn within and know what we actually are, that this ego, or our separate existence, thereby melts, thereby dissolved in the source from which we rose. That is what is meant by heart melting with love. At the early stages of bhakti, it does manifest as emotion. And when we allow the mind to rise, for example, when we think about Bhagavan, when we think about his love, when we think about his kindness, often tears come to our eyes. We feel very strong emotion of love. But when we are investigating ourselves, we need to go back to the source from which that emotion rose. That emotion rises from love. That love is our own real nature. So we need to go turn back within to who is feeling this emotion, who is having this love. Only when we turn within and thereby subside within do we thereby melt in love. This analogy of melting in love, Bhagavan also uses in verse 101 of Arunachala. There it's a very beautiful prayer. He says, like ice in water, melt me as love in you, the form of love. That is, Arunachala is the infinite ocean of love. We are like an iceberg in that ocean. That is, we because of our desires and attachments and everything, and our rising as ego, we have become solidified like an iceberg. In order to, we are never anything other than that ocean of love, which is Arunachala. But now, instead of experiencing love, we are experiencing desire. That is, we are experiencing love in a distorted form. Just like the iceberg is nothing other than water, but whereas water is fluid, the iceberg seems something solid. So it is the same water, but in a distorted form. Just like our love is now distorted as desire and attachment and likes and dislikes and so on. So we need to melt in love. That means we need to dissolve back into him. How do we dissolve back into him? Only by turning within with all-consuming love. And with that all-consuming love, we turn within and we merge back into our source and thereby melt in our source. That's what he means by heart melting with love. Such all-consuming love. So it goes beyond. Emotion is often associated with bhakti, but bhakti is beyond emotion. When we go deep in the bhakti, we go beyond the emotion. But that isn't to belittle the emotion. Bhagavan talks about in Aksharamulai, he talks about melting, like melting in a river of tears. So naturally on the path of devotion, we do feel emotion. But to go deep into that love, we have to leave the emotion behind, because emotion is on the surface level of the mind. We have to go much, much deeper than that. So I hope this answer adequately answers that question asked by that friend. And I hope I've answered your question also adequately.
Yes, Michael, it's clear, because he told us what he was, and he's also showing us a way as to how we can become that.
Yes.
So
Bhagavan is never satisfied. That is merely telling us that he's that which is shining in our heart as eye. He's not satisfied with that. He wants to show us how we can experience that ourselves. Bhagavan's teachings are all very, very practical.
Yes, Michael. So again, in the past, like Adi Shankara also, I don't know the exact text where he mentions this, but he talks about Shiva being that supreme consciousness who's shining in the heart from Hari down to the smallest creature.
Yes.
So he talks about, and Bhagavan says the same thing. So
yes.
Yeah, but one question, I don't want to take it in a different direction, but I'm sure you've seen like the pictures of Shiva with the three-eyed Lord with snakes around. Does Bhagavan see any difference between Shiva and Shivam? Like Arunachala is Shiva, right? But does Bhagavan see any difference between these two? Because I know he's told a lot of stories about Shiva, and he says he's his father. Like he used to call him as I don't know, you might know a lot about that, but is there any difference?
Bhagavan doesn't see any differences in anything. According in the 7th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, what does Bhagavan say? He says, what he says is, Yatatamai Ulludu Atma-sarupamandre. What actually exists is only Atma-sarupa. Atma-sarupa means the real nature of ourself. The world, soul, and God are karpanas, are fabrications in it. That means in Atma-sarupa, like the illusory silver in a shell. These three appear simultaneously and disappear simultaneously. Swarupa, that means one's own real nature, alone is the world. Swarupa alone is I. That means ego in that context. Swarupa alone is God. Everything is Shiva Swarupa. So according to Bhagavan, all things are nothing but the reality behind all appearances is only Shiva. Shiva, in other words, Shiva is because Shiva Prakasham Pillai is a Shaivite. That is, Bhagavan isn't partial to any name or form of God, but because in the context of talking to Shiva Kashyapalai, he said everything is Shiva Swarupa. So our own real nature, Atma Swarupa, is Shiva Swarupa. That's the real nature of ourself, is the real nature of Shiva. And that alone is what actually exists. So there's nothing other than that.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. It clarifies a lot. Thank you so much.
Right. Dipti.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I was wondering, and when I read some books as well, so what's the exact difference between awareness, consciousness, intellect? Are these different references to the I itself?
Awareness and consciousness mean more or less the same thing. Intellect is just a tool. Intellect is one of the 4 antakaranas. That is, the 4 antakaranas are mind, intellect, will, and ego. Manas, buddhi, chittam, and ahankaram. In this context, manam, mind, means the grosser functions of the mind: perception, memory, thinking, feeling, emotions, all these things. That's all mind. Intellect is the discriminating and judging and that is the discriminating or the discerning aspect of the mind, the ability to see things clearly, the ability to reason, the ability to recognize the distinction between what is real and what is unreal, what is permanent and what is ephemeral, etc. That is intellect. Intellect is obviously subtler than the mind, than the grosser functions of the mind. Subtler than intellect is chittam. Chittam means the will. The will consists of all the vasanas, both Vishaya vasanas and Satvasana, if we're fortunate to have Satvasana. So that's all the will. Ego, it's all these correspond to 3 of the 5 sheaves, the 3 subtlest of the 5 sheaves. The manam is the manamaya kosha, intellect, buddhi, is the vijnanamaya kosha, the chittam, the will, is the anandamaya kosha. The 4th one of these, ego, is not any of these koshas. What is the function of ego? Ego is, it is said in the old text, the function of ego is abhimanam. Abhimanam means, basically Bhagavan is talking about abhimanam in the verse 25 of Illumined when he says about ego, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes. That grasping, that identification, that misappropriation, that is the nature of ego. So as ego, we misappropriate Satchit. We take ourselves to be existing and to be aware. So we misappropriate the fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. We take that as our own, and we misappropriate the form of the body as ourselves. So that is the abhiman. We identify these things. We mix this I am with this body and identify both as ourselves. That is ego. Awareness, awareness in its pure condition is what is called chit or jnana, or prajnana sometimes it's called. That is the awareness in its pure condition. But ego is also a form of awareness. That is, as ego, we're aware of all these other things, so many other things, and we're also aware of ourselves. So, but this is not pure awareness. This is, it is sometimes called, in Sanskrit, it's called chittabhasa. Chittabhasa means, literally abhasa means a likeness or a semblance. So it's a semblance of awareness. It also means a reflection of awareness, because when you see your reflection in a mirror, you're seeing a likeness of yourself, a semblance of yourself. So in that sense, it's a reflection. In Tamil, a term Bhagavan used to distinguish ego from the pure awareness that we actually are, he said ego is sutaribu. Sutaribu means the pointing awareness. The awareness that points out things. In other words, the awareness that shows things. In other words, what he implies by that is the awareness that is aware of things other than itself. Pure awareness is not aware of anything other than itself. Pure awareness is what we actually are. So pure awareness is not aware of anything other than itself. But ego is that pure awareness mixed with adjuncts. Not just pure awareness is aware just I am. As ego, we're aware not just I am, we're aware I am this. I am this body. And because we take ourselves to be a form, we consequently see other forms. So this limited awareness, this false awareness that is aware of itself as a body and consequently aware of other things, this is ego, and this is what is described as Chitabhasa, or the Sutaribu. It is the seeming awareness. Why is it not real awareness? Because real awareness is aware of what alone actually exists, which is itself. It's not aware of anything other than itself. Whereas as ego, we're aware of all these names and forms which don't actually exist. They exist only in our awareness. So being aware of other things is not real awareness. It's a semblance of awareness. So we need to distinguish that whether you use the word awareness or consciousness, they mean more or less the same. Sometimes in different contexts, one word is more appropriate than another, but generally we can take them as far as Bhagavan's teachings are concerned, we can take them as being synonymous. So, but he uses, that is, in Indian philosophy, the sense in which awareness is used is in the sense of that which is aware, not just the quality of being aware, but that which is aware. So the pure awareness is aware only of itself. It's aware only I am. The impure awareness, the adjunct mixed awareness, which is called ego, is aware of itself as I am this body, and it's consequently aware of other things. Does that answer your question? You've probably got a bit more than you were bargaining for, but it's necessary to clarify these things.
Sure, that really was helpful. And another question is, are emotions reflection of the mind again?
Emotions are part of the mind.
Part of mind. And are these emotions associated with any sort of energy? Because in a way, when we're feeling peaceful, we feel very well physically as well. And when you're feeling the negative emotions like anger or any other, like sadness or anything, physically we feel very drained and probably very tired or things like that. So are these emotions or the mind itself, do they have any energy associated with them at all?
Yes. The energy that is behind emotions is our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. And our likes, dislikes, desires, and so on in their seed form are what are called vasanas. So long as we've got strong Vishaya vasanas, we will be swayed by strong emotions. Even the satvasana, the liking just to be, that can also give rise to emotion in the sense of, I was talking earlier about the emotion of love. That is when Bhagavan talks about melting in an ocean of tears. So that is when we have great love, great longing just to surrender ourselves, just to be as we actually are. Sometimes that can manifest in the form of a strong emotion, an emotion of love. But that is, emotion is all on the surface level of the mind. That emotion all belongs to, of the four antakarana, emotion belongs to the manomaya kosha, the manam. But the seeds that give rise to those emotions are the vasanas, which belong to the chittam or the anandamaya kosha. So that is, the root of everything is ego. the first sprouting of ego, we can say, is the vasanas. And then the vasanas in turn sprout as thoughts and feelings. And eventually Bhagavan said the whole world is nothing but a projection of our own vasanas. So we always need, the very root of all these things is ego. As ego, we tend to have very strong inclinations to attend to other things, because ego comes into existence grasping form, it stands grasping form. So grasping, the inclination to grasp things other than ourselves, those inclinations are called Vishaya Vasana. That is the nature of ego. And those Vishaya Vasanas are what give rise to the thoughts, to the emotions, and eventually to the whole, to perceptions, to the whole appearance of the world. All are sproutings of our Vishaya Vasanas. That is why the Chittam, which is it's called, which is the Anandamaya Kosha, is called the Karana Sarira, the causal body, because it's the vasanas that cause everything else. What are the cause of the vasanas? Ego, because it's only as ego that we have all these vasanas. So the root of everything is ego, and the very nature of ego is to have Vishaya Vasanas. That's what draws our attention outwards. Now, when we're following the spiritual path, we are trying to wean ourselves off our Vishaya Vasanas and to cultivate Satvasana. That is the way that we return back home. We return back within.
Sure. And is Atman the sole source of energy?
The word Atman in Sanskrit actually just means oneself. We need to understand from the context whether it's referring to ourself as ego or ourself as we actually are. Often Atman is used to refer to ourself as we actually are. But there are many times the term Atman, we need not always say, oh, that is ourself as we actually are, or that is ourself as ego. For example, in the term Atma-samapanam, self-surrender, Atman there means only ego. It's only ego is the self that we need to surrender. But in the term Atma-vichara, is the Atman in Atma-vichara, is it our real nature or is it ego? We shouldn't distinguish, because it's like asking, am I to look at the snake or at the rope? They're one and the same thing. There's only one self. That one self we have to investigate. Now that one self, that one Atman, seems to be ego. If we investigate it, we will find it is just pure awareness. So when Bhagavan wanted to distinguish our real nature, the term he used was Swarupa or Atma Swarupa. Atma Swarupa means the real nature of oneself. Swarupa means the real nature. So when Swarupa is used on its own, it implies Atma Swarupa, the real nature of oneself.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
So Atman, people talk about the self or the Atman as if it's a thing. It's not a thing. It's you yourself are that. Now you take yourself to be Dipti. That awareness I am Dipti, that is Atman as ego. The awareness, just I am, that is Atman as it actually is. That Atman as our real nature. Atman as Swarupa.
Yes, that helps. Thank you, Michael.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Right. And then David, I think we may have to make this the last question because time is getting on.
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Just one thing. Did Bhagavan recommend specific exercise or meditations to attain pure ego?
Our aim is not to... Ego is the root of all impurities. So our aim is not to get a pure ego. Our aim is to get rid of ego. Or we can say it another way, but pure ego is not ego at all. It is just our real nature. As far as exercises is concerned, as I said at the beginning, well, I mean, we started off talking about the first paragraph, but as Bhagavan said, we can get rid of ego only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. And for knowing ourselves as we actually are, the principal means is this investigation, who am I? So but if you want an exercise, the exercise is turning our attention within. This turning our attention within is both the practice of self-investigation and the practice of self-surrender, because to the extent that we turn within, we are thereby letting go of everything else, and eventually we're bringing about the dissolution of ego. For people who are not drawn to this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, other practices are taught. Bhakti, yoga, and so on. These practices are there, but these are all tributaries. These are all ways of purifying the mind in order to give the mind the clarity to understand, but in order to surrender ourselves completely, we need to turn within. So the only exercise is this exercise of turning our attention within. Yes. That is the principal. That is the principal means. That is the principal recommendation of Bhagavan. For those who are not ready to come to this, if they say, "Oh, Bhagavan, can't I do this by japa also?" Oh, yes, you do by japa. But try to when Kabir Ganta asked Bhagavan, "I'm not able to understand what is tapas," the first thing Bhagavan said is, if one sees where this I, because Kabir Ganta said, "I've done all this. I've done so much japa and I've studied all the Vedas and everything." So Bhagavan said, if you see where from this I, this thing that's saying I, if you see where that arises, there the mind will subside. That is tapas. And from Kabir Ganta, this was something very new. So he said, "Oh, can't I attain this by japa also?" And then Bhagavan said, if one repeats a mantra, and if one does japa of a mantra, if one sees the source from which the sound of the mantra arises, from where did the sound of the mantra arises? Only from I. So he's actually recommending the same thing, but in a different way. So the principle means for Bhagavan, that Bhagavan is not teaching this just out of some partiality for this. This is the only way of eradicating ego, and it's the most effective means of purifying the mind. If you want to bring about speedy purification of mind, more than any other exercise, this simple exercise of trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves, this is the most effective means.
Thank you.
Right. I think that's a good place to... Okay, Srinu, sorry. Srini, I see you've got your hand raised. This will be the last question.
Yeah, Michael, I'll make it quick. So when I look at the conversation, I get this question: why the humans, or why we are as a humans, come to this earth and getting into this kind of all this Maya, and again we look for Guru and go back to purify it. It is like we muddy ourselves. We kind of like pollute ourselves, and we look for solution to clean it up, mess it up, clean it up. So in the first place itself, is kind of like somebody's making us muddy, and now we are trying to go back to that kind of original state of like pure consciousness. I always have this kind of question. If time permits, you can answer it, or you can probably park it for next.
I think what you're saying, how do we become muddy in the first place?
Yeah.
Bhagavan said, first investigate yourself. If you investigate yourself and see what you actually are, you will know you never became muddy. Then the question becomes redundant. It becomes superfluous.
But it seems to be all this.
It seems to be.
Yeah.
That is the answer. It's all seeming. That is why Advaita says everything is just vivata. It's just an appearance. None of it is real.
It's hard to accept it, because it's so true. It's like 1,000% true.
If you meet someone in your dream, and if that person tells you all this is an appearance, you're just dreaming, it'll be very hard for you to accept it, because it seems so real. But when you wake up, then you'll say, "Oh, that person was right. It was all just a dream."
Yeah, it reminds me. My son always, he's a little one. He says it should be like the state should be, we should be in a wakeful meditation. Like you are in a wake up, but you're always in a deep sleep state. You be like a sleepy wake up guy, or you are in deep sleep state even though when you're awake.
He is very wise.
Hard. Yeah, he gets all this. But I'm trying to get, he's my teacher. Yeah. Thank you.
The trouble is, sometimes we can see these things more clearly when we're small.
Oh,
but as the mind develops and the vasanas begin to sprout, then it all becomes clouded.
That's what I always say. I should go back to my little 2 years old, 3 or 5 years old, something like that. Which is like going back, unlearning all these things. Like, why keep on learning all this nonsense or whatever we call it as worldly things, and keep unlearning it, going backwards, coming back to the pure self where I started in my journey.
But someone once asked Bhagavan, why do we find smaller children so lovable, so attractive? Bhagavan said, because they haven't yet sprouted their horns. The horns of the vasanas are there, but they haven't yet sprouted.
Yeah, it's still in a seed form.